Next big topic, boys. This is going to be one I feel like we focus on for pretty much maybe the next 12 months, maybe all the way up until the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. Does Christian Pulisic have a future at Chelsea? I say this because he's played, and these are the stats, 134 minutes out of a possible 810 minutes in the Premier League since Thomas Tuchel took over from Frank Lampard. So in short, that is not a lot. He came on for the final 30 seconds of regulation and their win against Everton. Chelsea are 11 games unbeaten in all competition, flying under Tuchel since he's been in charge, back in the top four. And I had the chance to speak with Thomas Tuchel and asked him about Pulisic's situation after their win against Everton. So why is he not playing more? Is there a problem with, injuries, confidence? Is it the system he's playing in? And have a listen here. We're going to play the video of what Thomas Tuchel said to me, and I think it's going to raise a few eyebrows. All right, lads?
Yeah, and I cannot say nothing else than positive things about him. Maybe his problem is that I know from Dortmund how strong he is from the bench. I think he started from only in the cup game, and it's in the end my responsibility and my fault. But like I said, is a bit unfair because I know how good he is and what an impact he can have in 20-30 minutes. And he was a bit unlucky in the last games. So there's no lack of trust, there's no lack of quality, it's just maybe to be a bit patient.
Okay, so that's what Thomas Tuchel had to say about Christian Pulisic and his lack of time and playing minutes at Chelsea. Nick, what do you think about that?
So I'm trying to keep in perspective the fact that when you hear this guy talk after games, he gives you a lot of information. It's terribly interesting. He goes into his tactics. It's almost that soccer coach symposium after the game. He tells you exactly what happened. And I kind of want to take some of this at face value. And if he's viewing Pulisic as a 20 to 30 minute impact sub, and maybe that's just his best excuse for I prefer other guys over him in the starting lineup, I can deal with that. And it just has to become something where we see that play out more. I remember there were also 2 or 3 games in the middle he missed there. But again, 134 out of a possible 8-10 minutes, the way he's been going, are we saying anything different if it's 203 minutes out of a possible 8-10? But I do want to take into account that we have not seen a lot of Tuchel press conferences at Chelsea. And this is a guy who's very, very intelligent, who has taken the reins for Jurgen Klopp and for Unai Emery, right? 2 people who had good success at those clubs. And I think he's used to tamping down expectations and playing the long game. So I'm hopeful.
Andy, what about you?
The Tuchel dynamic is definitely at play. And Nick brings up a good point in the fact that he's obviously very intelligent, he's very thoughtful, and he's a deep thinker, and he's uncharacteristically willing to kind of explain his line of thinking to the general public, which there's not really a lot of upside in doing that. And I would imagine that probably doesn't last too particularly long now that he is in the Premier League and he's dealing with the British press, the way that will get at some point. I mean, they've not lost under him, so they've not had the opportunity yet. But when the opportunity comes to take something that he says a little bit too much and twist it or turn it against him, he will learn and he will eventually stop doing that. I also think the language, not barrier, but just the language factor is at play here. If you're ever trying to kind of dance around giving an honest answer to a question, your brain is working a million miles an hour inside your head. And that's in your first language, let alone your second or third language. And then you have to kind of, put something out there. So I think it's a little bit brutally honest from him. In a way, I appreciate it. In a way, it really frustrates me because 30 seconds is not 30 minutes. And this is still a Chelsea team that, for as good as they've been defensively, they're winning a lot of games 1-0 or 2-1. They could use some goals. Could they not use a little bit more of just attacking impetus and something to push them forward, to drive them forward? And it's not Callum Hudson-Odoi. It doesn't look like it's Timo Werner, other than to finish chances. Kai Havertz had a good game, but it has to be Pulisic. If it's anyone in that squad, it has to be him.
Andy, great point there. A lot of angry US men's national team fans out there are saying, why is Timo Werner getting so many chances? He's not putting them away. He's playing a lot, getting a lot of minutes, but he isn't scoring goals. So why couldn't Pulisic come in and play? And for me, I'm looking at this, and like you said, it's brutally honest. And I honestly think that if Christian Pulisic is watching that or hearing those quotes, he will be very confused because he seems to know Thomas Tuchel very well from the time at Dortmund together. Tuchel referenced that when he answered my question, and that was a long time ago. So there's a lot's happened, and Pulisic's developed as a player a lot since then, since he was young and kind of come on for the last 20 or 30 minutes at Dortmund. So if Tuchel has kind of pigeonholed him into being that player off the bench, then I don't think that's a very good thing for Christian Pulisic, because clearly he hasn't changed his opinion of him as a player in the first few months in charge at Chelsea. So my question, Nick Mendola, to you is, if he's not playing at Chelsea, can he still dominate for the US men's national team? I think that would be the big question for all fans of the USA, right?
Yes, and I think the answer is yes for a time. We've seen this happen for other teams. The guy that I think about right away, and I haven't been able to think of anyone better, so hopefully you guys can get me, is Mkhitaryan when he wasn't playing a lot for, and again, that's a much smaller, sorry to the Armenians out there, but that is a smaller endeavor. They're often the underdogs. He has to be their best player. But I look at him and I saw a guy who would be almost reborn there. And we saw it a little bit maybe with Sigurdsson when he was at Spurs. Even guys who are key points of bad teams like Timo Pukki. So for me, being in the picture right now is fine. And seeing how he does, I think he'll do fine this summer. I think he's had a lot of injuries, and the freshness is going to be a really nice factor as well. And he may be that player reborn we see. But long-term, if we're talking next November and it's the same thing and it's a couple months into the season, I look at him and I looked how he looked when he was waiting to sub into the game. I think it was Men in Blazers who put a little quick meme up of him going, oh, let me in the game. And I just think mentally it's got to be hard for someone that age who was given the number 10 shirt 6 months ago.
Andy, does that kind of play into the feeling that we're getting now with Pulisic, that it's maybe the right place but at the wrong time? He clearly has the talent. He's got the number 10 shirt, but the managers change so often. The philosophies change so often at Chelsea that he could potentially just wait this out, and Tuchel could have a horrendous run, and he might have another new manager by the time next season rolls around. I very much doubt that, but should he wait it out and try and get back into the team? Because Tuchel clearly rates him and speaks about him positively, right?
That's the thing, is he is potentially one injury or two bad performances defensively from Chelsea, from Tuchel either having to go to him into the starting lineup to replace someone, or switching up from the 3-4-3 that he's gone with, or the 3-4-2-1, whatever you want to call it. And suddenly there's a place in the team for Christian Pulisic. Like it changes so quickly. And I think that that speaks to a new manager in a new job, but more than anything, it speaks to the culture of Chelsea and the way that things just operate there. It is, nobody blinks an eye when there's three managers in a 24-month period at Stamford Bridge. It's just what they do. And, you know, the players deal with it. You're professionals. You get paid handsomely. Find your way into the team. Find a way to add value to the new manager, prove your worth to him. And eventually it might take a little bit of time, but everybody gets an opportunity at some point. Now, it might be a 90-minute shift. It might be a couple of games in a row, and he will absolutely have to make the most of that. I don't think all hope is completely lost at Chelsea if we're talking about this season in the much shorter term. There's still a lot of ways back into that team. They're still in the Champions League. They're in a good situation against Atletico Madrid, and they could make a deep run in that competition. And he has experience there, from this time at Dortmund. So there's a lot of factors at play over the next, what do they have, 10 games left in league play and potentially a handful in the Champions League. It's just, I want to see him get an opportunity. That's all I care about. And then we can at least look at it and say, he had his chance. He either took it or he didn't take it. He needs to stay and fight for his place, or he needs to go and find a place that will value him more in line with what the U.S. men's national team needs him to be.
Joe, I was just going to say that I think he is having a rough year to start with. And I mean rough compared to his standards. It's not that he's been bad. It's just he was absolutely electric to finish last year. Maybe the end of the season came at the worst time for him because he had started rolling. And the managerial shift, obviously, he's one of the guys that affected, even though it hasn't affected Chelsea. The one thing that I keep going back to is I think there are two players on Chelsea who really need to get going more than anything. And I love Havertz and I love Ziyech, but it's Werner and it's Pulisic. And if you're honestly asking me how many players under the age of 23 in the Premier League that I believe could be more important and better and higher end than Pulisic, there aren't many, but one of them's Werner. I saw what he did last year. He has this rare combination of everything. So if Tuchel's not going to try and work out two guys at once when he has four to work out, I do get why Werner's being prioritized. And then Andy clued me into this site. I always go to these advanced stat sites, but he clued me into the Football Reference site. You pull up Pulisic, and he's passing wise and even defensively amongst wingers, and he's everywhere. And I like to think that Tuchel's a smart enough guy that he's got the numbers people telling him stuff. And in that case, getting a chance is a matter of time. Will he seize it is the question.
And then we look to the next step for him potentially, because we've spoken about him in recent weeks, and I know people watching this, especially US men's national team fans, will be very frustrated and saying he has to go somewhere where he can play. There's been links with Bayern Munich. There's other reports in England that Liverpool and Manchester United are keen to try and bring him in. I'm looking at the example of someone like Clint Dempsey, right? We spoke about this earlier this week when we caught up. A superstar at Fulham, played week in, week out, was the talisman on a team in the Premier League. Then he went to Tottenham. He was no longer, that big fish in a small pond. Didn't work out well for him. He still delivered for the US, but I can see you nodding, Andy, is playing regularly key and being the main man on the team key for Pulisic now at this stage in his career? Because he's going to be turning 23 soon, in the months ahead. Does he just need to play regularly, because he hasn't been doing that at Chelsea and then at Dortmund for a little bit as well before this?
It's a really delicate balance between needs to play every game, needs to be the man at a team, and needs to be at a place that really challenges him and pushes him to continue on with his development. Like, he's 22. There's still a ways to go in that for him. And so going to Bayern Munich, leaving Chelsea to go to Bayern Munich isn't exactly quitting and taking the easy way out. You might face more competition if you go to Bayern Munich, but at least it feels like there will be stability around him at a place like that. At a play, there's other clubs in the Premier League where I feel like it would just be kind of a recreation of the situation at Chelsea, where there's so much attacking talent and there's such a demand. Like the demand of the Premier League, from 1 to 20 against all those teams is just so much, and it's so different than any other league in the world that it takes a certain personality and a certain type of character to really not be able to handle that, but to relish that challenge. And if that's not him, that's fine. He just needs to find his place where he can be successful, he can be challenged, he can be further developed, and he can have success. We need him to win something as well. We need Christian Pulisic to be winning at the club level to then bring in a new mentality to the US men's national team.
Quick, let's finish this by name one Premier League team, if it's not Chelsea, where Christian Pulisic should play. Nick?
Oh, God, why would you go to me first? Everton.
Andy?
I wanted to say Everton, but instead I'll say if Mourinho goes, Tottenham would be great.
Brentford.
I'm going to say Leicester. I think playing for Brendan Rodgers would be perfect for him. I think it may be early, but if he's in this situation midway through next season, then he has to think about going somewhere to play regularly, see out the campaign. And Nick brought it up earlier. This may work out in the US men's national team's favor this summer, because he may be very fresh and he may actually be playing to put himself in the shop window as well for a move to a big team in Europe or another big Premier League team. So we'll keep you updated on Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com with the latest Christian Pulisic news, how he's playing for Chelsea, if he's playing, hopefully he is, and US men's national team fans, interested to hear your comments about the situation, because Thomas Tuchel, that update about him being just a bit of a bench player, good for 20, 30 minutes, I'm sure those quotes will stick for a little while, and Pulisic will be eager to prove him wrong.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe. Make sure you subscribe to watch highlights all season long and join us at the weekend at 7 a.m. Eastern on NBCSN for Premier League mornings, and sign up for Peacock Premium, where you'll have access to 175 exclusive live games all season long.